Hello, History of Medicine students. This is Professor Bowen here, back with another video. In this one, I'd like to give you some additional guidance on the second part of your research projects, for which, as you know, you'll be doing an analysis of a primary source text from our course content. As the instructions for this assignment explain, the goal for this paper is to take some of the things you learned from your literature review and use them to examine your chosen primary source. On account of having familiarized yourself with some of the scholarship on your chosen theory or methodology or concept, you now know how other scholars have defined and made use of this. And in the process of seeing how these scholars have utilized your chosen theory, methodology, or concept, you've now equipped yourself with a powerful tool, a tool that I want you to apply to a reading of your chosen primary source text. So how are you going to do this? How are you actually going to use the tool you're now in possession of? That's the question I'd like to answer in this video. Before getting to this, however, let me back up a little bit and talk more generally about some of the things that I've hoped you've learned so far in this project, and specifically from the literature review. One of my goals for this project has been to help you see that the information we get out of texts depends on how we approach them. Primary sources aren't neutral objects. While they contain the raw data of the past, the truths they hold are neither singular nor self-evident. Instead, they are context-dependent. They change on the basis of the questions we ask, the assumptions we bring to them, and the interpretive methods we employ. Moreover, the things primary sources tell us about what happened in the past are not easily accessed. The act of determining what's in a primary source is not as objective a task as it might seem. As you've probably seen from some of the primary sources we've already examined this semester, it's not automatically apparent what these texts are telling us. So it's not as if historians are simply couriers of information who bring easily perceived messages contained in ancient texts to a contemporary audience. The nature of these messages can only be ascertained after careful contemplation and skillful analysis. Indeed, the process by which historians retrieve this data and use it to reconstruct the past is actually quite complex. In order to extract meaningful things from primary source texts, historians need tools. These tools are the things that you learned about while writing your literature review. They are the concepts, theories, and methodologies that historians bring into the archive, the library, or the field to crack open the documentary record. In the process of equipping yourself with one of these tools, you should now have a basic understanding of what they are and how they can be used to crack open primary sources. To get specific, among the things you should now know are, first, what kinds of questions has my tool been designed to answer? And along with this, what are the aims, purposes, and end goals associated with my tool? What are the people who use it hoping to accomplish? Next, in terms of applications, you should now have an answer to the question of what kinds of things can my tool actually do? Or in other words, what are the interpretive techniques associated with it? What specific content within a primary source can I use my tool to probe? And how do I actually do that probing? That is to say, what are the specific ways of gathering or looking at data associated with my tool, and what makes them different from other kinds of tools? And lastly, you've probably, or hopefully, now got an answer to the question of what kinds of insights and conclusions does the use of my tool typically lead to? what is its ultimate value with regard to the history of medicine? It's the answers to these questions that will help you enter the application stage of this research project. If you know about the kinds of questions that your tool allows us to ask, you can ask these of your primary source. If you know about the interpretive methods or analytical techniques associated with your tool, you can then employ them to analyze evidence from your primary source. And if you know about the findings that work with your tool has typically led to, you can engage other scholars in a discussion of how your results compare to theirs. All of these are things that I would like you to do in this paper. As the instructions for your assignment indicate, the paper that you're going to write should be argumentative. Your argument should be an answer to a specific question you're going to ask of your source. In the syllabus, I provide one example of what a question for this paper might look like. So as to make things a bit more concrete and hopefully easier to understand, let me provide some further examples. Let's say, for example, that you've chosen to look at your primary source through the prism of the conflict thesis. If this is your tool, you might ask something like, what does my source tell us about the relationship between science and religion in the time period I'm studying? Is the conflict thesis valid here, or does this source suggest that some of the alternative models proposed to this, like the complexity thesis, are actually more accurately capturing the relationship of science and religion in this particular era of medical history? Or, to give another example, if you've chosen to look at your primary source through the lens of social constructionism, you might ask, what does my source tell me about the various social and cultural variables that shaped definitions of disease, methods of treatment and diagnosis, and or medical knowledge? To give a third example, if you have chosen feminist theory to guide you through your primary source, you can ask what your text tells us about one of the many things that feminist scholarship is concerned with. For example, questions about how medicine participates in the construction of gender norms, or about women's agency, or about women's status as healers and healthcare providers or patients. To give yet a fourth example, if you're making use of comparative methods, you can ask something like, what do my sources tell me about the major similarities and differences in the way that these two societies experienced a common disease or medical event? Regardless of the tool that you're using, the big thing to think about here is this. How do I bring the questions, concerns, perspectives, and interpretive methods associated with my chosen tool to bear on the primary source I've chosen to investigate? And then you need to do that investigation, come up with an answer to your question, and develop an argument that backs it up with hard, direct evidence from your primary source. When I say hard, direct evidence, what I'm suggesting that you do is highlight and dissect particular bits of evidence from your primary source. Pay attention to specific passages or moments of your text that speak to the question you're asking, and then analyze them in a way that illustrates the argument you're trying to make. For this paper, in other words, I want you to delve into the details of your source. I want you to retrieve specific examples from it. I want you to analyze choice excerpts from it. I want a deep dive, not a general impressionistic reading. Of course, you don't need to cover everything in your source, but do make sure that you're applying the insights from your literature review to the examples you discuss, and then do the analysis right in front of my eyes. Along the way, if you like, you can pass judgment on the overall value of your chosen tool for understanding different aspects of medical history. How valuable is your tool really? Perhaps after doing your analysis, you determined that your tool is ultimately of limited value, or that in order to maximize its potential, scholars need to rethink the way they use it. It is perfectly fine to issue comments like this, especially if when doing so, you present them in a way that engages the existing scholarship on your topic. Discussions about the limits and benefits of your chosen tool are probably best confined to the conclusion of your essay, as I indicate in the instructions for the assignment. For information about other things to include in your essay, please see the instructions for the assignment. If you read through these, you'll see that I'm recommending that you split your paper up into 5 parts. I hope that the instructions I've given for each of these parts are sufficient, but if not, please feel free to get in touch with any questions you have. I'm available for consultation on this last part of the project, and I would be happy to do whatever I can to help you with any aspect of your primary source analysis. But for now, I think that's all I've got to say. So thanks for watching this video, and good luck with the second part of the project. I'm really looking forward to reading your analysis, and I guess I'll see you all real soon in our discussion board. Until then, stay safe, everybody, and be well. Bye-bye for now.